Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask everyone to please rise to accept the colors.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Please be seated. As we begin our Yom Hashoah commemoration, I would ask everyone to please just check your cell phones to make sure that they are in vibration mode so that no one receives a call that disturbs the sanctity of this day. Page 2. We must remember the atrocities committed against our people. The murder of 6 million men, women, and children. We must remember the communities, synagogues, ideas, dreams, vision, hope, and faith that died along with our slaughtered brethren. By remembering, we keep our people alive. By remembering, we demonstrate our resilience as a people. By remembering, we give honor to the victims of the Holocaust. we fulfill one of the highest mitzvot, to care and pray for the dead. By voicing our sadness and anger at the atrocities our innocent brethren endured, we call ourselves and others to action. By voicing our opposition to hatred, we stand against prejudice and anti-Semitism. By acting in the memory of those murdered, we begin to heal the brokenness of our world and to create a new beginning. The poem, "Unto Every Person There Is a Name," immortalizes the names of those stripped of their identities and slaughtered, and gives us the opportunity to complete the work of Tikkun Olam.
Unto every person there is a name. Unto every person there is a name, bestowed on him by God, and given to him by his parents. Unto every person there is a name, accorded him by his stature and type of smile and style of dress. Unto every person there is a name, conferred by the mountains and the walls which surround him. Unto every person there is a name, granted him by fortune's wheel, or that which neighbors call him.
Unto every person there is a name, assigned him by his failings, or contributed by his yearnings. Unto every person there is a name, given him by his enemies, or by his love. Unto every person there is a name, derived from his celebrations and his occupation. Unto every person there is a name, presented him by the seasons and his blindness. Unto every person there is a name, which he receives from the sea and is given to him by his death.
On page 4, members of the second generation will be lighting the symbolic 6 candles for the 6 million. They will also take it and pass it among the survivors that remain with us. As they reach out to touch the candles, they take part in the lighting and the memorial.
Candles of joy, candles of sorrow. Candles we light wherever we are, candles for Hanukkah, candles for Shabbat, candles for Havdalah, braided like challah, or candles for pure delight. So many, many candles.
All kinds of shapes, all kinds of colors, all of them candles of joy. Only one candle is right, to remember someone who died, a candle for the soul, and more candles we light. In silence and in honor, 6 candles, a memorial to the myriads who are gone, 6 million,
all of them candles of sorrow.
"75 years ago, in the heart of civilized Europe, aided by the silent acquiescence of so many nations and peoples of the world, a wind of abomination and racial hostility, a wind of cruel, efficient evil, whipped a continent into a frenzy of selfless, senseless, vicious murder. 2/3 of European Jewry were diabolically and ruthlessly dehumanized, hunted, and tortured to death. 6 million Jewish men and women, 1.5 million of which were children. They were taken by other human beings to die in gas and fire. Their very ashes spewed from the chimneys of the death camps, carried by the breeze, nameless and graveless. Their ashes spread over the entire continent that had itself become a graveyard. Martin Niemöller, a pastor in the German Confessing Church, spent 8 years in a concentration camp. He wrote these famous lines: "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out, because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out." Tonight, we gather as a community to weep, to mourn, to stand as vigil to the honor of the Shoah and the destruction of 6 million Jewish souls in countless Jewish communities. We stand also in their names, as a caution to a world that has still not learned the lessons of horrific results, of wanton hatred and vicious dehumanization. The lessons of the Shoah have not yet been learned. So we gather to affirm that we will never forget. We gather to bear witness to the murder of our 6 million. We gather because they no longer are here to gather. They cannot gather to cry out in one clarion voice, "No more." Their memories are a blessing. Their mission now is ours. Torat Yisrael adayin chai. Am Yisrael adayin chai.
As we remember the deaths of our 11 million brothers and sisters, we honor and memorialize them all, Jews and Gentiles and others who were victims, martyrs, and heroes.
We honor those who were tortured. That's not me, sorry. We honor those who died because they were Jews. We honor those who died because they helped Jews, those who died because they resisted the Nazis, and those who died because of their ideals and convictions.
We honor those who were tortured, impoverished, dehumanized, deported, enslaved, and murdered.
No one wanted to believe it, not Christian, not Jew, for who can confront the terrible reality of the murder of an entire people? Who can confront the murder of innocence, murder
They were murdered while the world was silent. They were murdered while the world pretended not to notice. They were murdered, most, but not all. There were survivors.
There are survivors of the Holocaust. We know them. They are the parents whose children are gone, and they are the children without parents.
We know them. They are the remnants. No brothers, no sisters, no aunts, no uncles, no grandparents, no cousins, no neighbors, no friends.
Please rise. We know them, the Holocaust survivors, because they are part of us. They belong to us. We are all members of a single family, haunted by our shared memories. So many were begrudged their very right to exist, and we were robbed of the gifts that they would have been to humanity. We mourn the blameless murdered, the old and the young. We hallow the memory of our martyred innocents. Please be seated.
For these do I weep, and for the millions crowded in ghettos and in detention camps, for those wandering in forests, and those hidden in attics and in the underground bunkers, for those who found refuge in the bosom of another faith or who lost their God, for those who were given over to experiments at the hands of wild beasts called doctors and scientists, for those who died of hunger and of thirst, smothered to death in freight trains or in gas chambers, shot, buried alive, or cremated, for those who were brought out to be killed by hanging so that they would be seen, and for those who sanctified God's name and the name of the people Israel, refusing to be subdued, fighting to the death. For those who lost their homes, their dignity, and their hope, and for those left alive to live the horror anew, day after day, moment after moment. For these do I weep, for infants who never learned to say mommy, for boys and girls whose youth was stolen from them, who withered before coming to blossom, for young men and women who never were blessed beneath the wedding canopy, for the elderly, denied the privilege of a gracious old age, for the orchestras and for the music, and for all the world's beauty whose rainbow of colors was lost, replaced by only brown and gray and black. For all these do I weep.
As the war was winding down and American troops got further into Germany and further into Eastern Europe, they discovered the concentration camps. No one believed the stories of them. The people talked about them, but nobody believed that they existed. After the first camp was liberated by the American soldiers, they were so horrified at what they saw, they immediately sent for General Eisenhower. For those who don't know, General Eisenhower was the Supreme Allied Commander of the ETO, European Theater of Operations. They sent for him to memorialize what they had seen. He came there and he inspected that camp from top to bottom so that he could, for us now in his future, to deny anybody, the deniers, that this actually happened. He had it well photographed and to prove. He wrote a letter to George Marshall. George Marshall was the chief of staff under Truman, and this is part of the letter that he wrote to George Marshall. This is how flabbergasted, I don't know what other word to use, that General Eisenhower was when he saw it. I have never felt able to describe my emotional reactions when I first came face to face with indisputable evidence of Nazi brutality and ruthlessness, disregard of every shed of decency. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it to be my duty. In a home, the belief, assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda. These words, as I just read, are inscribed on the Second World War Memorial in Washington in concrete on the wall. These exact words.
At this Yom Hashoah service, we will be listening to the testimony of Holocaust survivor David Wisnia. At the same time David Wisnia was in Auschwitz-Birkenau, there were 4 Jewish women who had been smuggling small amounts of gunpowder from a munitions factory within the Auschwitz complex. Under constant guard, the women in the factory took small amounts of the gunpowder, wrapped it in bits of cloth or paper, hid it on their bodies, and then passed it along the smuggling chain. Using the gunpowder, they planned to destroy the gas chamber and the crematoria, and then launching an uprising. On October 7th, 1944, these women prisoners, along with others, rebelled. One of the women, Regina Saferstein, was the aunt of our local Holocaust survivor, blessed memory, Rose Rechnick. The Nazis crushed the revolt. Nearly 450 prisoners died during the fighting. Several days later, the SS identified the 4 women who had been involved in supplying explosives to blow up the crematoria. All 4 Jewish women were hanged. Let us reflect upon those in leadership roles like Regina Saferstein, who risked their lives to save other Jews during the Shoah. Let us think about in our daily lives how we can contribute to our communities and beyond. This is what we do when we celebrate leadership during the Shoah.
Please rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shachar Yehin Bamiromin, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tayachat, Kanfei Hashchinaya, B'mahalot Kedoshim utohorim, Kezohar harakia mazkirim, Linishmot sheshet milyonei achenu b'nei Yisrael, Kedoshim v'hatorim chalelei hashavah, Shenaflu b'dei harotzchim, Hanatzim v'yozreihem, Shenispach damam, Auschwitz, Belz, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Mauthausen, Majdanek, Sobibor, Treblinka, Uva Getaot shel Bialystok, Krakow, Lublin, Minsk, Vilna, Varsha, ובשאר מחנות השמד באירופה, שנהרגו ושנשחטו, שנשרפו ושנחקנו על קידוש השם. ויבוא שאנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמותיהם, אנו בעל הרחמים הסתירם, בסדר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצורך חיים מנשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר Amen.
Please remain standing.
We remember our brothers and sisters who perished because of man's inhumanity to man. We are grief-stricken, recalling those who in their youth, in old age, were cut down by the vicious hand of evil. We turn to God and to one another for comfort as we mourn, and for strength as we persevere. Through the ancient words of the mourner's Kaddish, sanctifying God's name, we affirm our bond with those we have lost. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmeh rabah, be'alma divrach hiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmeh rabah mevarach le'alam le'almei maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemeh dekudsha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Please be seated.
It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Cantor David Wisnia. Cantor Wisnia is a Holocaust survivor who has been adopted by our community. I should start at the beginning to tell you that many years ago, Rabbi Gordon Geller from Shirat HaYam began his career with Cantor Wisnia, and the story of Cantor Wisnia's connection to our community continued with Doug Servey, an Oak Crest High School teacher who taught social studies and met David Wisnia in 1996. Soon after, Cantor Wisnia became a regular visitor at Oak Crest High School when a Holocaust survivor's testimony was needed to complete the Holocaust teaching unit. Doug later retired and joined Stockton University's adjunct faculty, and Cantor Wisnia's visits to our local schools soared as Doug had more time to escort him to schools throughout Atlantic County so the students could hear the testimony directly from a Holocaust survivor. Cantor Wisnia wrote a memoir that is often read before he visits a school. It's entitled One Voice, Two Lives, From Auschwitz Prisoner to 101st Airborne Trooper. In the fall of 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland. Cantor Wisnia and his family's lives changed dramatically as the Germans pushed through the country. The Wisnia family home in Warsaw happened to be located in the area of the city that became the Warsaw Ghetto. In the fall of 1940, at the formation of the ghetto, their once comfortable home became crammed with family members forced to move there from all over Poland. After his time in the ghetto, Cantor Wisnia's journey of survival had many twists and turns. You'll hear about them this evening. It was just about 73 years ago, in May of 1945, that Cantor Wisnia was liberated. He survived ghettos, labor camps, and Auschwitz-Birkenau. Unfortunately, few of his family members survived the Holocaust. Cantor Wisnia is here this evening to pass on the lessons of the Shoah to the next generations and to tell us his story of survival. During the Shoah, he survived as a teenager. Please listen carefully. He was a witness, but now you are becoming a witness to his testimony, and it's your responsibility to remember and to tell his story. It's no easy task for a survivor to tell about their experiences. Nonetheless, he's here to talk to you this evening and to tell his story because he knows how important it is for you to hear it, to remember it, to pass it along to your children and to future generations so that we all continue to remember and never forget. Thank you to Cantor Wisnia.
Wow, what a turnout. Please. If you will permit me, I hope you can hear me all. May I ask you to add to the word Yom Hashoah, which literally translated means Day of the Holocaust. I would love if you could add the word V'hagvura. In other words, the impression might be that people went like lambs to the slaughter. Yes, they did not know what was in store for them, but Yom Hashoah should be pronounced as Yom Hashoah V'hagvura, and the heroism. Okay? Again, Yom Hashoah V'hagvura. Well, I thank you for the opportunity to return to this community that I have had the pleasurable relationship with for the past, I'd say, 35 to 40 years. Starting with, where's my friend, Rabbi Gordon Geller, whom I shared a pulpit with in Pennsylvania, and also Rabbi Geller, of course, who was at Shirat Hayam at Ventnor, is it? We began our careers together. Rabbi Geller was the rabbi and I was the cantor after we graduated, or after he graduated from Hebrew Union College. Our friendship continues today. I did not graduate from Hebrew Union College, but I had a different type of graduation. I was a soloist in the Nozik Synagogue in Warsaw at the age of 9.5, 10, where the famous cantor whom I learned from was the Caruso of Jewish music, Gershon Sirota. Some of you might have remembered him. And what a voice that was. My dad did not think that was big enough because we only had a choir of 28 voices. So he switched me over to the great synagogue, the Tlometske Synagogue, where I became a soloist under the tutelage of the famed Moshe Kusevitsky, again, the greatest tenor whom I learned from, believe it or not, at the age of about 10 and a half and 11, I learned the opera Luci van le Stelle from Tosca. In 1996, I met Professor Doug Serby, who is right here with me, who brought me here, who was participating on a New Jersey Holocaust Commission study tour for educators. So began another connector for me to your community. It took 8 full years for Doug to convince me to share my story with his high school students. I began visiting Doug Serby's classes at Oakcrest High School in Mays Landing. I had no idea that this journey of telling my life story that began at Oakcrest High School would see the time when over 10,000 students, educators, and community members have listened to my story that you are about to hear. And 22 million people have watched the video on this life story on Facebook or on YouTube. And by the way, I would like to inform you that we are in the process, or some producers are in the process of making a movie out of it. The Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center's writing as witness project of the Stockton University under the direction of Dr. Marianne McLaughlin, who happens to be here today, assisted me writing my memoir, finally, entitled One Voice, Two Lives, From Auschwitz Prisoner to 101st Airborne Trooper. That's what makes it so unusual. Each semester I am fortunate to look forward to sharing my life story with some of my students, and I call them my students, at Stockton University, which I have been doing for many, many years. I was born in Poland, near Warsaw, a suburb of 25 kilometers away from Warsaw, but my father had his business in Warsaw. My father was a factory owner in Warsaw that manufactured folding beds. You see, most people don't know, but Poland doesn't have a middle class, or never had a middle class. You were either wealthy or you were poor. And the majority of the Jewish population, believe it or not, which was 10% of the population, the total population of Poland was 31 million. We had about 3 million Jews, close to 3.5 million Jews in Poland. Anyway, my dad was a manufacturer of upholstered beds for the big stores of Warsaw. Please bear in mind that Warsaw had a population of close to 1 million. It wasn't a little town, of which I would say about 40, most say 50% were Jewish. And the myth perpetrated on the Polish population was that all the Jews are wealthy and have a lot of money. The Germans certainly picked that up, and that was the reason for their beginning of the annihilation process, not only because they were Jews, but because they would have their money, their gold. Anyway, in 1937, after I finished school, and some of you people might think, I see there's some children here, that it's tough to learn a language. Well, you will not believe this, but I learned every single subject in 2 languages, including arithmetic. Now, you probably are wondering, what in the world is he talking about? Well, every single subject. I went to a private school. My father could afford to do that. Never went to a public school. Private school, Yavne and Tarbut. Everything was language 1, Polish. Language 2, Hebrew. Not Yiddish. I wasn't allowed to speak Yiddish. Yiddish was the language of the Gola. My Hebrew happens to, I still subscribe to Yiddiot Achronot. And believe me, it's not an easy language to learn. Let me just mention for 1 second, we're talking about arithmetic. If there are kids here, can you imagine multiplying a samach by an ayin? In 1937, we moved into Warsaw because my father got tired of taking a bus home every Friday night for Shabbat. We weren't exactly Orthodox because I sang in the synagogue there, but neither were we so free that we did not know that Shabbat was coming. My father came home and it was like a party. Shabbat was a big dinner, then go to synagogue. I will always remember our Shabbat dinners, although we were not, as I said, very, very traditional or what you call religious family. I fondly remember my Aunt Helen, who taught me how to make chicken soup, believe it or not, with matzo balls. Now, she managed to get out of Europe 4 months before the war broke out. Now, that played quite a trick on me, of course. On September 1st, 1939, Germany attacked Poland and our lives changed. I mostly stayed in my house, really, as the Germans conquered Warsaw by the end of September. And please let me tell you, I don't know if it's in part of my notes. The entire population, including the Jewish population of Warsaw, took approximately 28 days to permit the German Nazi machine to enter Warsaw. While they occupied Poland in 3 days, it took them 28 days after that, to occupy finally Warsaw. Having a Jewish-owned business, my father's factory was forced to close. About a year later, the Warsaw Ghetto was established. Actually, it was in 1940. Our home was located right at the corner of the ghetto, and the whole neighborhood is still standing. If you ever go to Poland, you will find Żelazna and Krochmalna Street. That's where my house was, and I go there every year or a couple of years to see. I'm getting a note here. I'm digressing too much. All our relatives who were forced into the ghetto joined us. Our home became crowded. I became an orphan. When my family was murdered, my mom was 37 years old, my father was 41, and my dad one day befriended one of the Luftwaffe officers, and a truck came into the ghetto to pick him up. He built something for this guy. One day, one Friday morning, he asked me to take his place. He wasn't feeling well, or it was by premonition, for whatever reason. When I came back home that day from the Okenche airport in Warsaw, my family was dead. My father, they found a gun, I found out later, on him. He wasn't a, pacifist, far from it, and had a part in the Polish underground. I ran away from the Warsaw Ghetto. I never went back to my apartment when I came back to my hometown, which is a couple of miles away there, Sochachev. I wasn't safe where I was, so I went to Chervinsk Ghetto, where I had a cousin, and there I was transported to a work camp. I volunteered to be a singer and that helped me, of course, to survive. Singing is my life. After 3 months, we were forced into another ghetto. I could stay in that ghetto by hiding each time there was a deportation operation. In December of 1942, my luck ran out. I was sent on a 4-day grueling journey, traveling in a cramped cattle car, which arrived at the Auschwitz. Never heard of Auschwitz in my life. And in Polish, Auschwitz is called Oświęcim. Of the 1,500 people on that train, remember, this was December 1942, before all the transports with the Jews started arriving in Auschwitz. There was only one crematorium in Auschwitz that wasn't even finished, crematorium number 2. I am the only survivor left to tell this story of the 580 men that were selected to work from that train. I realized when I saw and heard the assessment say to his officer, "Alle über 18 zum Lager." I didn't know what in the word lager meant. I never heard that word. I made myself 18. I was only 16, but I quickly figured out that in order to be 18, I would have had to be born in 1924, not in 1926, as I am. All my records, believe it or not, show still, I never changed it, that I was born in 1924. I kept the day, August 31st. I figured I was going to get into trouble if I make a mistake, and that saved my life right then and there. The other 980 people from that train, men, women, children from the ghetto of Novodvor, were all murdered that particular day. They tried out the guests in the little White House that I wrote about, by the way. It's in the museum in Washington. By now I was 16 years old, and I had lost my childhood and teenage years. I soon discovered that those of us who were strong enough, brought to Auschwitz, Birkenau. I never left Birkenau for over 2.5 years. It's incredible because average lifespan in Birkenau was about a month. My first job was collecting bodies of the people who committed suicide, and it was very easy to do, to go over the trip wire that separated the ditch and the electrified barbed wire fence. It could still be seen it was about a few months ago, I tried to occupy my mind by remembering life before the war with my family and friends. I would look up at the sky and wonder why this is happening to me. Maybe it was a dream. I had family that was safe in New York. Did they know? My Aunt Helen, did she know? One night, the cell block leaders, by the way, when I got into Birkenau, asked, after about 2 weeks of grueling, carrying bodies into, a wheelbarrow to be taken to that crematorium to be burned, had I continued to do this for a little longer, I wouldn't be standing here. I was asked, anyway, what in the world, who can sing here? This is in the cell block of about 450, 500 people in Birkenau. Well, everybody knew Wisnia sang, so I sang. And guess what I sang? I knew German, of course, and I knew Polish, and what was popular, some of you might know, Bei mir bist du schön, they loved it. Or the SS finally found out that there's a singer in the crowd, and I became an entertainer at their drunken parties, not every month, but whenever they wanted somebody, and I sang. Man muss ja Klavier spielen können, wer Klavier spielt hat Glück. Anybody by den Frauen? I don't know if any of you understand German, but they loved it. Boy, did they love it. And they couldn't care if it was done by the Andrews sisters or it wasn't. I sang in Yiddish, German, and English. Word spread to the SS about my singing talents, and that's how I became an entertainer. What it meant was a little better treatment. I didn't live by the rations, and that's what made me survive further. Auschwitz was a place where people were condemned to live in a cesspool of evil. All religious, moral, cultural, social, judicial restraints associated with human behavior were ignored. The bonds that hold humans to civilized entities were turned and were actually totally ignored. They're blatantly disregarded. There were no restraints, no social sanctions against murder. That established system and prevailing rules of the camp determined why a transport of 1,500 people were reduced to approximately, hold on to your head, 6. Everybody was moved out, whoever was strong enough to get to work. Within a month of time, most of the people were moved to a different place. I finally never left Auschwitz-Birkenau. I was there for the full 2.5, close to 3 years, from 1942 to 1944 in December, when we began hearing the Russian artillery. Of those 6, I am the only one survivor alive. I don't find anybody. I'm looking for somebody with my number, my 1000 number there, alive to bear witness. In January of 1945, I was the one of the last group of Jewish prisoners to be taken on a death march from Auschwitz to Gleiwitz. There were 900 of us who survived the march. We were loaded on top of a train of freight cars. We were to be taken deeper into Germany because the Soviets were approaching. We could hear their artillery. We arrived at, believe it or not, Dachau, to hide the atrocities that the Germans committed in the western parts of Poland and all the concentration camps or annihilation camps. Really, we come into Dachau. From there, we went south. I volunteered, actually, to do this because when I got into Dachau, I knew I survived Auschwitz, but I would never survive Dachau. There were no place to eat, no place to sleep, no place you can imagine. The bunks, there was nothing, and full of people. You know, the Germans realized that they were losing the war or that they had to move either to Austria or further in to occupied countries. We began to travel towards Austria. I volunteered with another 100 guys who looked strong enough, and I was in good physical shape. I have some pictures here to show you. I was a pretty good-looking kid. I was only 18 at that particular point, remember? 18 and a half. We saw Allied planes, and we felt the ground shake as the last car of our train was destroyed because the Germans attached themselves, you know, to our trains. I'm talking about the armies. There were 12 of us who escaped. I organized a group, but they caught us. The SS guards found us. I thought for sure they were going to kill us. Well, they needed us more than killing us. So because what they asked was for volunteers of people who can carry 25 pounds of, or 50 kilograms, I guess, of cement. They were building their bunkers for the Messerschmitts that were being destroyed by the Allied planes. The beautiful part of this whole business is most people, you see, my story of the Holocaust is a unique one, and that I spent over 2.5 years, you know, in Auschwitz itself, endured a death march, escaped a German troop train heading to Austria, and then joined the famous 101st Airborne Division, serving in it in Company 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment until the end of the war, from the beginning of March until May 7th, when the war ended in Europe. I was an American. I was not only an American, I was 100%, 101% American. Really. I formally could not join as a GI, so they made me a civilian, but of course in uniform, attached to H Company 506 Parachute Infantry, and became the interpreter asking the SS to lay down their arms. And believe it or not, because of my fluent German, boy, they wanted me badly. And boy, did I learn English fast. Yes, I did learn English in school in Tarbut in my first year of Tarbut in Warsaw. But what do you learn when you learn a language? You learn words. You don't learn sentences. You learn words like, first you learn the dirty words, of course. Then you don't learn sentences. And boy, that played a trick on me, let me tell you. Most people live their lives in memories of their life in chronological order. But my life is much different than most people in the United States. And therefore, I have lived two different lives. One before World War II, and the other after World War II. The Shoah and the life I experienced during the 6 years of the war, I keep in a guarded place in my mind. For many years, people would ask me, how old I was, I would always tell them 6 years less than my age, simply because I didn't want, I didn't count the years of World War II and the Shoah. In fact, I had older numbers that were tattooed on my arm, on my left forearm, removed when I came to Philadelphia. Of course, plastic surgery was not perfected. I couldn't sleep for about a year after that because not of the operation, but what they did is pulled together, but you could still see the 6 protruding on top, my last digit over there. So that I did not have to explain to people, because when I came here, everybody, I used to love to wear short sleeve shirts. In the Bronx, I lived on 170th Street and Jessup Avenue, and used to go into the diner there, and everybody said, "What is this number?" We didn't talk about it wasn't popular to talk about Shoah, about anything like that. So I used to tell them, believe it or not, it was my telephone number. And some of them believed it. Really. Anyway, why would anyone want to remember any of those horrible, terrible memories from that time period anyway? I now wish that I had not done that when I came to the United States as an American soldier on a troop ship to Hoboken, New Jersey in February of 1946. And believe me, I understand why the Pope kisses the ground when he comes someplace. Different reason, but I kiss the ground of the United States. I really understand what the United States is all about. And it hurts. It really breaks my heart to watch some of the, desecration of the flag. It hurts me, really. As I stand here at the approach of the 74th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz on January 27th. By the way, you could hear me. I have been given I got the honor of doing the El Male Rachamim. It's a special one that was done in Auschwitz for the 70th anniversary. You can Google it in and find me singing the anthem in front of presidents, kings, and God knows what. I was invited by the director of the museum in Auschwitz and still am. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get Professor Servey there to go with me at the next trip. Anyway, it's beyond my ability to fully express or comprehend what happened to me in the 6 years of World War II. I have tried my best to convey and describe my life as prisoner 83526 in the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp, where I lived for over 2.5 years. This was not a pleasant journey, but it is my hope and faith in God that humans will learn or eventually come to its senses and learn to live in peace on this earth. With the passing of time, the number of World War II veterans and survivors of the Holocaust are passing at a very alarming rate. This has given me concern that future generations will not know or learn from both these tragic events. I am counting on you, people who are memorizing, who will remember, who will make a difference to teach your children. Please remember my story and let's learn from the past to make a better future. When in Auschwitz, I wrote 2 songs, and I would like to sing just one very little bit of it. I know it. I'm overextending my time here. And the beauty of it is my grandson, Avi Wisnia, if you want to look him up, here's a plug for him. He's a specialist in bossa nova, believe it or not. He went to Brazil, and he's some musician. You can see him on YouTube. He finally, after 35 years, I found somebody to translate my Polish song, into English. And of course, it became popular with the people in Auschwitz. And here's how it goes. I'm going to give it to you. I hope somebody understands Polish here. Gdy przypominam sobie sławny Oświęcim, czułem się jak w grobie, widząc krematorium dym. You see, it rhymes. Błoto wzdłuż i wszerz, błotem szyja, błoto nogi też. A zapytanie Auschwitz, Abstand, mitten up, to słyszałem wciąż. Cały dzień kręciłem się jak wąż. Oświęcim, ja tłukłbym ciebie, ile w lizie Oświęcim. Gdy cię wspominam, to mnie gryzie Oświęcim, Oświęcim. Taki właśnie jest ten Rym, za twe spanie i jedzenie, szlak na twoje pokolenie, Oświęcim. Za te walki w buksach wszędzie, Oświęcim. Niechaj ci ziemia lekką będzie, Oświęcim, Oświęcim. Serce masz jak stal, gardzę tobą, mam do ciebie żal. Pom, pom. That's the Polish version. And give me about 2 minutes to give the translation of my grandson of this song. This is as close as he came, and believe me, there were all kinds of people who came here to the States to translate this song, couldn't do it. Polish is not a language that lends itself, to rhyme in short words. You got to go with skis in the back. Anyway, here's how it goes. My grandson just did that. It's not published yet, and here I want to give it to you. I remember it so clearly, my days in Oświęcim. Got out alive just nearly, hey, it does rhyme, and still the name it stings. Still I see that place, enduring like the scars I can't erase. Appell, Abstand, mitten up, hear the Scharführer's call. You'll wish you just were never born at all. Oświęcim, through pain and sickness, always working, Oświęcim. With death behind you, always lurking, Oświęcim, Oświęcim, evil like some twisted dream. Never mind the hope of fleeing, hunger is the only being, Oświęcim. Like numbers on my arm it lingers, Oświęcim. I curse you with my broken fingers, Oświęcim, Oświęcim. Heart be hard as stone. Hatred is the greatest weed you've grown. Bum, bum. That's it.
On April 19, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising began. The ghetto fighters were able to resist for nearly 1 month. News of the resistance traveled to the Vilna ghetto, where the Vilna poet and underground fighter Hirsch Glick wrote the Yiddish song Zog nit kein Mol. The song became the anthem for the Jewish partisans.
Please rise.
Zog niet geen molas, du gehst dem letzten Weg. Wenn ich Himmeln bleien verstehen bleie Tag. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebäckte Schau. Sveta pointen uns der Trott, mir seinen Tau. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebäckte Schau. Sveta pointen uns der Trott, mir seinen Tau. Von grünem Palmeland bis Weideland von Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen es spritzt von unser Blut. Sprutzen wird tut unser Gwurde, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen es spritzt von unser Blut. Sprutzen wird tut unser Gwurde, unser Mut. Sog nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Wenn ich Himmeln bleien verstehen bleie Tag. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebänkte Schau. Sveta pointen uns der Trott, mir seinen Tau. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebänkte Schau. Sveta pointen uns der Trott, mir seinen Tau.
Please be seated.
First, I would like to say, Cantor Wisnia, that was amazing. I feel it's my responsibility to preserve my parents' legacy. My name is Barbara Singer Roth. I'm a second-generation Holocaust survivor on both sides of my family. I've been married to my amazing husband, Henry, for 32 years. Henry is also a second-generation survivor of both his parents' sides. We have been blessed to have 4 wonderful adult children. Both my parents, Al and Manya Singer, were from small towns near Radom, Poland. They led a simple but fulfilling lives, weaved with rich Jewish traditions. In 1939, my dad was 24, my mom was 12 when the Nazis invaded Poland. That's when the trouble began for the Polish Jews. Our families were being rounded up from their towns, put into ghettos, and eventually sent to concentration camps. Life as they knew it ceased to exist. My dad was transported to Dachau concentration camp in Germany, my mom to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Their families were sent to Treblinka, where they perished. Their survival throughout these horrible years was nothing short of a miracle. In 1945, after liberation, my parents met in a displaced persons camp in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany. Shortly thereafter, they married and began reestablishing their lives, finally emigrating to the United States. First to Brooklyn, where living conditions were difficult and language barriers limited their job opportunities. Due to the survivors being deprived of their education and normal social lives during the Holocaust, the Jewish Agricultural Society and the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society assisted in settling Jewish immigrants on small farms in New Jersey. My parents joined about 1,000 other Holocaust survivors onto a chicken farm in Vineland. This worked out well because there didn't seem to be a language barrier between my parents and the chickens. Growing up in Vineland, along with my older brother Sam, life was happy and fulfilling. Our family worked tirelessly together. My parents succeeded from the chicken farm to a barbecue chicken business, eventually resulting in building a motel in Vineland. Working in the family business was expected of me and of most the second generation. The closeness of family was important to my parents, that along with our faith. My father often would remind me, be a mensch, a good person. They were simple rules, which we appreciate even today. Although my parents came from large families in Europe, I grew up with no grandparents, no aunts, no uncles, no first cousins. They all perished in the war. My mom and my dad were the only remaining survivors of their families. Initially, the survivor population didn't seem to be accepted by everyone, maybe due to our cultural differences. This did change over time as we became embraced by the community. The Holocaust survivor families became our extended family. Education and having a profession was very important to my parents. I pursued a career in pharmacy, which I still do today. My mom also had a thirst for learning. She was very well read, earned her GED, and attended Cumberland County College. In April 1983, my mom and I had the opportunity to attend the American Gathering of Holocaust Survivors in Washington, D.C. My father wasn't feeling well and could not attend. Joining about 15,000 Holocaust survivors and hearing speeches from Benjamin Mead, Elie Wiesel, and President Reagan, who I quote, "Our most sacred task now is ensuring that this greatest of human tragedies, the Holocaust, never fades, that its lessons are not forgotten. This gathering would change my life forever." Sadly, just days after we returned, my father would undergo a procedure and suffer a life-threatening stroke. He would later pass away from complications. This tragedy was compounded by my brother sadly passing the same day. A month after burying my father and brother, my mother discovered she had breast cancer. I put my career on hold, moved from North Jersey, and came home to care for my mom. Although now we were only a family of two, we were best friends. I will cherish the time we spent together forever. We were surrounded by our close, extended family of survivors who were always there for us. They made us feel whole. Due to these circumstances, my mother felt she had to sell her motel, and it was Henry's family who purchased it. We met at the settlement, and the rest is history. In March 1986, I felt blessed to have my mom walk me down the aisle at our wedding. Sharing such a happy occasion with both sides of our family and friends was so special to me. My mom felt blessed that I married into such a wonderful family. Sadly, my mom passed in June of that year. Being married to a Holocaust survivor family, we were fortunate to share very similar backgrounds. We understood each other. Henry's entire family took me in as a daughter and sister. His family understood the importance of Shabbat dinners, celebrating the holidays, and raising a family with Judaism. It gave us both a common understanding and shared values. As an executive board member of Stockton University's Holocaust Resource Center, I had the opportunity to join a study tour to Poland and Germany. This trip would be life-changing. We visited the concentration and death camps of Treblinka, Majdanek, Belzec, Plaszow, and Auschwitz-Birkenau. I experienced a profound sense of what was lost during the horror of the Shoah. Zachor is a Hebrew word that means remember. I am committing to remember all the survivors, past and present, and the 6 million. Keeping their memories alive is something I strive for. Educating my children to do the same is my desire. The message I would like to leave with you today is to show kindness and compassion to others who may appear to be different. Feeling different can take on many forms and can hurt and isolate us. If we can do something each day to make someone's world a brighter place, our future will be better. Never again, what we do matters. Thank you.
I would ask everyone to turn to page 13 for the passing of the legacy. Cantor, if you would come back to the bima. I would ask the survivors among us to please rise. Join with the cantor in the recitation of the legacy, and then remain standing throughout the rest of the generations. If you are able, survivors, please rise.
Do you want him to rise?
Just this one.
Just here? We, the living survivors, entrust the legacy of the Shoah to you, our children and grandchildren, and all those who have come after the fire. We want you to vow that the sacred memory of our suffering and our martyrdom shall never be scorned or erased. We want you to recall the heroism of Jewish resistance, remember the shining examples of sacrifice and kindness from the righteous Gentiles. Remember the racial prejudice and discrimination that led to the Holocaust. By not forgetting, you will pay tribute to those who were destroyed. By not forgetting, you will ensure for those who live and those who are yet to be born that we intend never to allow such inhumanity to happen again. This is the heritage we, the survivors, entrust to your custody for safekeeping for all generations to come. Together, we
accept the obligation of this legacy. And now I ask please remain standing. The second generation, if you would please rise. And recite together with the Ross and remain standing.
You would want me to sing Avinu Shebashamayim, would you, to close? Sure you? Okay. I did that, yes.
Would the second generation please recite with us? We are the first generation born after the darkness. Through our parents' memories, words, and silence, we are linked to that annihilated Jewish existence whose echoes permeate our consciousness. We dedicate this pledge to you, our parents, who suffered and survived, to our grandparents who perished in the flames, to our vanished brothers and sisters, more than 1 million Jewish children so brutally murdered, to all 6 million whose unyielding spiritual and physical resistance, even in the camps and ghettos, exemplifies our people's commitment to life. We pledge to remember.
please remain standing. I ask the third generation to rise and join with Melissa. Recite and remain standing.
We shall teach our children to preserve forever that uprooted Jewish spirit which could not be destroyed. We shall tell the world of the depths to which humanity can sink and the heights which were attained even in hell itself. We shall fight anti-Semitism and all forms of racial hatred by our dedication to freedom throughout the world.
Sophie, Trey. And if there are fourth generation among us, would you please rise and join with Sophie and Trey?
We affirm our commitment to the State of Israel and to furtherance of Jewish life in our homeland.
We pledge ourselves to the oneness of the Jewish people. We are your children. We are here.
That's it. We close the program with...
No, that's not the close. It's just the close of this part.
Excuse me, the close this part of the program, and would love for you to join in the greatest song that was done by Colonel Shai Abramson, the head chazan or cantor of the Israel Defense Forces. I am no tenor, but I'm sure you can all join. The words are of the refrain, Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. Come on, you can do it. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. Avinu, Avinu. Come on. Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. Barech, Barech, et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, Hagen Aleha, Be'evrat Chastecha, Sirat Shalom, Bechol Milfanecha. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. One more sentence. Ushalach, come on, Orecha.
The song, well, how do you follow that? The song we are going to sing, the poem was written by H. Leivik, one of the leading Yiddish poets of the last century, after he visited displaced persons DP camps in Austria. And it was set to music by Leibu Levin, the Yiddish actor from Chernivtsi, who narrowly escaped the horrors of Holocaust only to find himself imprisoned and working for 13 years in Stalin's labor camps in Siberia. I learned this song from great Yiddish singer, my friend Nechama Lifshitzaite, whose first yahrzeit is coincidentally today. And I taught it to my children, and we want to dedicate it to Nehama Lifshitz and to our great-grandparents who lay in nameless graves in Ukraine and in Europe. But against all odds, we are here because they did believe. We are here, Mirzainendo.
Jeden singen in den bunkers animamin Bevias ha-Moshiach אף על פי שישמעיה אני מאמין wird kommen sei von dort und sei von hier Bye, 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 bye.
Jeden singen in a lager, ani mamin, afalpi. Una file azam sich, ani mamin ve'amamin adil bi.
Bye, 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 bye.
Lo mir singen it's der alle animamin. Oi mir singen es singt sich es sei wie. Sei noven sei beginnen animamin. Afal pi sheis mameo afal pi.
Bye, 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 bye.
Wird kommen,
muss kommen, animamin. Fragt nicht gehen, werden wir. Jeden singen, animamin, animamin.
Otto kommt, Otto ist es schon und Bye, 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 bye.
Yiddish Kinder, zwischen uns, amid our people. My Jewish name is Eliezer. Another Eliezer Geller, whose possible blood relation to my own family I do not know, was born on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean with my dear cantor David. He became one of the dozen block captains martyred during the heroic Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. In Eliezer's sacred memory, and at a time when Nazis and KKK now brazenly march with their swastika flags, within the virtual shadow of Jefferson's Virginia home, I have striven this past decade to organize the construction of an Atlantic City Holocaust memorial. With today's arrival of Stockton University's new campus at the Atlantic City Boardwalk, my fervent hope is to finally fulfill that dream. We would be building a dramatic, educational, and consciousness-raising memorial on one of America's most heavily trafficked thoroughfares as a compelling message on behalf of universal human tolerance. In that spirit, I offer this benediction to the God of our fathers, who remembers all forgotten things. At this hour, we have recalled the burning of the synagogues, the houses of study, the destruction of our holy books and Sifrei Torah, the sadistic torment and annihilation of our scholars and teachers. Tonight, we have remembered how in the Warsaw Ghetto in April 1943, Jews valiantly defied the overwhelming forces of inhuman fiends. Our hearts are filled with sorrow, and our cup of bitter remembrance is overflowing. We pray thee, O Lord, remember thy martyred children of the house of Israel, who died al Kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of thy name. Help us to strive and toil and sacrifice for the coming of that messianic day, when violence and desolation shall be no more, when the Jewish state of Israel may be firmly established, when at last nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, and when all thy children everywhere may live in peace and security, with none to make them afraid. Amen. Amen.
And now I ask the congregation to please rise, join the cantors in Hatikva and God Bless America. And please, at the conclusion of those two songs, if you would please remain at your seats as we wait for the colors to lead us out of the sanctuary. Please remain at your seats. Careful on the steps, gentlemen. Seitrem l'shalom. Go in peace.